Well, hey everyone, I want to thank you all for coming. I'm really excited to be talking today with Emerald Fennell, writer, director, producer, about her film Promising Young Woman. So, Emerald, welcome. Welcome to
Thanks.
Zoom. Probably your, what, 1000th Zoom that you've done about this movie?
It might be, yeah. But actually, I've started to really enjoy it, and also I'm really finding the sort of snooping into people's lives
Mm,
quite thrilling.
like seeing what their homes are and
Seeing what the situation is. I
seeing a dog
always
walk by or like a kid screaming and the stuff you
Yeah,
didn't used to see. Yeah.
normally you don't get to see any of that stuff, but you get to, yeah, lots of people's cats coming in. Yeah, I look like I've been held hostage in a kind of grey box, which is kind of actually very reflective of my real life. So
You do have it has that kind of, yeah, decapitation video kind of look. It's really spot
yeah,
on.
kind of hostage situation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, which is perhaps appropriate for the film. You know, I want to talk kind of nitty gritty specifics with you if we can. But first off, I'll just do the question that, forgive me, you've probably gotten way too many times to count, which is just, but I'm just genuinely curious because you wrote this and directed it. It's an original, piece of material, and you're kind of making your entrance as a feature film director with it. So I'm just curious where it came from and what the genesis of it was.
Well, we're kind of, I think, almost exactly the same age. And so I think certainly for me, it was growing up in that kind of noughties era of like raunch culture where all of the stuff in my movie kind of, you know, pouring girls drinks, slightly more drinks than you would, or waiting for the drunkest girl in the club to take home, or, parties that get out of hand, losing your virginity by any means necessary. This was just like the stuff of comedy movies when I was growing up. And of course, that's reflected the world that I think we all lived in. And it was just really interesting. I guess I'm interested in general in what we do when we think we can get away with it, and yeah, what we do when we think no one's watching. And so, but that is all a very general thing because really, for me, it tends to be a scene usually for everything, which will be the beginning of everything. And for this, it was a drunk girl lying on a bed, being undressed, drunkenly saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And the man undressing her, telling her she was safe. Um, and then, suddenly sitting up sober and saying, "What are you doing?" And I think from there, I sort of knew who Cassie was and what the film was going to be.
I read that that was the scene that you pitched to producers when you were did you have a full script at that point and you were pitching it to get a read or
No, no. So I pitched basically the whole pre-title sequence of the movie, sort of starting in the club and ending with that moment. And I think really at that point, and that's all I pitched to Lucky Chap, who bought it sort of off the back of that. But I think really, usually for me, I'd be so interested to know how you do it. But I just I have to kind of completely write it almost on my own and deliver something. I'm not very good at, I don't write anything down. So it all happens in my head, every bit of redrafting, every sort of different thing. And then I will write it down almost like transcribe it, I guess, at the end. So it's,
did this feel because obviously you'd done a lot of work before in kind of all the various capacities of filmmaking, almost writing, acting, of course. Like, did embarking on this project feel like a totally different step for you, or just like a natural, evolution of what you'd been doing before?
I think it felt like a natural evolution. It's the thing I always wanted to do. It feels to me, I love I just love films and television. So any opportunity to work on a set is something that I can't say no to. I just love it and have loved it my whole life. But definitely everything that I think I've done leading up to this was in order to do this, I think.
So acting, like while acting, for instance, you were already kind of thinking behind
Yeah,
the camera. Yeah.
I think so. Certainly, the great thing about doing a kind of long-running series like I did on Call the Midwife was that you get to see, because you know you work in blocks, you get a different director and DP for every block. It's a perfect opportunity to see a kind of a literal like control version of everything. See what doesn't, what people respond to, what they don't, what saves time, what wastes time, that kind of stuff. Obviously, I mean, I love acting in and of itself too. It just so happens that I just grew up wanting to make things, do things however I could, because I loved it so much. So yeah, it should have been, in many ways, I think it should have been a nightmare, because we had 3 weeks prep and we shot it in 23 days, which I'm sure maybe is a kind of similar.
3 weeks prep, 20
Yeah.
days. I did not know that. It's giving me chills.
Well, and also stuff, you know, we had, because there are so many different locations,
Yeah.
not like at the end of the day we could pick up anything. It was like, okay, bye, pharmacy, never seeing you again.
Yeah.
So it should have been a nightmare, but it was just, I just loved it. I just loved it. I loved everything about it. It was stressful, but in the most pleasurable way. And I think that's partly because of all the other stuff that I'd been doing. It was such a pleasure. It was just pure pleasure, really.
Now that I know how insanely fast you had to make the film, I'm just curious because I mean, one of the many amazing things about the film is how is how controlled a piece it feels. You know, it's one of those films where you feel like every single decision, from camera placement to costume to music cues to every performance, has just been sort of thought through to a T, and there's a complete vision behind it. When you're sort of faced with a schedule, both prep wise and production wise, like that, did you sort of see the movie in your head clearly from the get-go? Was it something that you found as you collaborated with the various people on the film leading up to shooting? Did it change a lot while shooting, or did it, because of the time, just sort of have to be, we got to execute?
If you're making something low budget, it matters the color of somebody's nails. It matters the kind of notebook they write in and the color of the ink. And that stuff is not expensive, and it doesn't take long to do. I think that for me, I guess I'm a bit of a sort of school prefect type of person, even though I was not a school prefect because I smoked too much. But naturally, I'm a sort of homework person, diligent, sort of bossy, all of those things that I think sort of Tracy Flick in Election kind of character, which is really annoying probably for everyone. But you have to be detail oriented and kind of obsessed in order to make, yeah, in order to kind of make the world that you want to make, really. So I guess what was very lucky was at the beginning, I sent with the script, I sent a very long playlist, detailed playlist, which had quite a lot of music that we ended up using in it. And then very comprehensive mood board for set design, costume, makeup, all of that stuff. So it meant that what was really great, everyone who came on board, people like Michael Perry, who's incredible art director who did It Follows and Sweet Valley High TV series, and Nancy Steiner, who is a costume designer who did like The Virgin Suicides and Twin Peaks. You know, people who just, I think, were kindred spirits in terms of like, I don't know, perverting the feminine, I guess, is for like a most general description of it. So it kind of meant that when I said to Nancy, like, it's going to feel like she wants to be wearing like a sad jumper and sweatpants, but she needs to look the opposite of that. You know, we need hair ribbons, we need fluffy, welcoming, butter wouldn't melt. You know, it needs to be the film, everything about the film needs to be Cassie's film, it needs to be a trap. And I think that my father has always is very much a time spent in reconnaissance is never wasted person. So as long as, for me, as long as I arrived on set every day and knew exactly what we needed to do and how it needed to look, we were okay. But also, you know, you need to give people the time and the flexibility to then kind of put their own mark on it too.
Well, so for instance, when it comes to say working with actors on a scene, like let's talk about the opening scene with Adam Brody, or opening scene once Adam Brody, the sort of event you were talking about, her and Adam Brody in the bedroom. I'm curious, with a scene like that, how much did you kind of have, whether it's a storyboard idea or shot list or something kind of going in, how much do you sort of go, okay, let's just run it with the actors and see where they naturally kind of want, and then I'll carve it around that? Is it a balance? Like how does a scene like that kind of get into its final shooting shape?
Well, usually it's a balance, I would say, because yeah, you don't want people to feel completely confined. That is an unusual situation because also it's kind of an intimate scene, and so I'm careful. You know, it was very important to me with this movie in particular, in any movie, that it's kind of very heavily choreographed, so nobody feels like just on. I think partly with sex scenes and stuff, so people feel like on their own.
Mm-hmm.
People don't mind as long as it's choreographed. But what the worst thing is like I read a script recently, actually no, not recently, years ago. It's like, how old I am, time's just like slipping past. But he takes off her clothes, they fuck, it takes as long as it takes. I was like,
Great to be on set with that. Guys, it says in the script, takes as long as it takes, so
it's on you. So I think that scene is a bit of a peculiar one because it was quite choreographed. I think in general, me and Ben, the amazing, wonderful, very patient DP, had quite a specific shot list. It's quite a static film, really, in lots of ways. It's very formal, because Cassie's quite formal and reserved, and it was important that, like, you know, the only times really we have any steady cam are when she loses control, either because things are kind of spiraling or when she's like falling in love with character Ryan. So that kind of stuff had to be decided early on. But yeah, you never want people to feel confined, but at the same time, the style of the movie was, I think, very important, and luckily Carey is an actor who really, she works very, very well within confines. In fact, she likes it. She doesn't want to be left to sort of do her own thing, even though she's naturally so gifted. She likes to know what the parameters are so she can then like move outside them, I guess.
It's one of the remarkable things, I think, watching it, is that the camera, whether it's in those intimate scenes or other more what you'd think of as more mundane scenes, I guess, the camera always seems like it knows exactly where to be. And that sounds like an intuitive thing to say, but it can be very hard, obviously, to have something come across that way. I'm thinking of like with her and Adam Brody, when they sit down on the couch, when he's pouring her the drink and they sit down on the couch, and you're just wide enough on the couch to see how much room, how much negative space on the couch is left by him sitting as uncomfortably close to her as possible. And then you cut in close on them, but not so close that you can't still always see the glasses and the different levels, you know, of liquid in them. Or like with Christopher Mintz-Plasse, I loved how you know, this is sort of camera meets set design, where I felt like every time he's saying something really like, you know, creepy or obnoxious, he's positioned so that right behind him is some, like, for me as a cinephile, it's like, you know, Penig or Fellini movie. I'm just like, oh God. It's just these little touches, you know.
That's it. That's what's so fun. It's what's so fun about making anything, especially it's like, and especially because this movie really is a dark comedy more than it is anything else. What can you say about a guy that you're going to meet once, very briefly?
Yeah.
How much can you say if you're inside his apartment? That's such a fucking gimme. Like, you know, let's have the dream catchers. This is a man who is no stranger to cultural appropriation and who is kind of always wanting to indicate that he's like thoughtful and a dreamer. Like, make sure that the guitar in the corner is just dusty enough to imply that it's only brought out whenever a woman kind of crosses his path. You know, we got to name the record that he's snorting coke off, and it's Jeu Dangereuse, you know, fake kind of French sing. It's just that stuff for me is like, it's it's just, it tells you so much about character, and it's so pleasurable, and it's not expensive. You know, if you've got an amazing team and you make each other laugh with all of these little sort of details, then yeah, I just think, and as you say, it's just sort of making sure that you can frame things, you know, things like in Jordan, the lawyer's house, it's kind of, you know, it's like creating that kind of slightly funereal kind of biblical sort of space, you know, and everything is, all the plants are dead in very expensive vases, and all of the cigarettes are kind of put out on very expensive plate. You know, it's just, it's that stuff that it's fun to do, and it's really,
Yeah, it's also like because you have this sort of very consistent kind of candy color palette throughout the film. Those moments that cut against that, like his house, or other moments, feel, again, it's like you're saying, you're getting this whole added layer of just storytelling shorthand that kind of tells you so much about the character and what their life behind. Again, characters you only see for one scene. I mean, it's one of the things I loved is these quick sketches in a way that become kind of indelible. And yeah, a lot of that is sort of the things you'd expect, writing and performance, but a lot of it is just the things you surround the frame with or put behind them. Or
what was really lovely about working with the producers and sort of and everyone on this film was, I think all the films that I really love, and actually I think your films have something of this too, it's sort of, they feel both real and allegorical, and sort of, yeah, and or like sort of timeless in some way. And I think that's the kind of storytelling I just find so appealing, is that if you can show people that this is both an incredibly personal, specific story, but also one that could be an old biblical story that you were told at school, or a fable, or, you know, an old Greek sort of tragedy, that is the stuff that is so exciting for me.
there's one shot that like really lodged in my head, and I'm wondering if it was planned or if it was just oh, that's a nice image, which is kind of along these lines of what you're talking about. It's this cutaway of the balloon that's floated up to the ceiling of the hospital, and it's just this red balloon, such a beautiful, just kind of saturated red with the you know, what do you call it, basically the fluorescent light panels and the sort of drywall. Like I don't know, talk about that shot. Was that just oh, that's cool, or was that planned from the get-go? It felt to me like it sort of packed the movie, aesthetically at least, into one frame.
You know, it's in the script,
Really?
and it's a few things, I suppose, in that moment needed something to show that that it was a children's hospital, that there's something kind of both beautiful and incredibly bleak about that place. There's also a sort of nerdy, sort of shining convergence in that, because she's sitting in front of this sort of shining,
Yeah, giant
thing, which is always just like a fun thing to do if you're obsessed with horror movies like I am. But really, that was kind of the yearning, I suppose, for the past, for her childhood in a place where children are sick. And when we pull out, you notice that a little girl sitting next to her is also looking at the balloon, and they're both kind of looking at it longingly, and it just, yeah, it just felt like it's these moments with Cassie when she's on her own, where you see all this kind of, I guess, the promising young woman that's been lost,
mm-hmm.
that is kind of, she's stuck in this kind of childlike place, really. And so it kind of, that had all of that stuff, the kind of childishness and the sinisterness all together.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that surprised me watching it, because obviously, you know, it's sort of how it was marketed and the sort of presentation. You know, you've got your kind of juicy sort of revenge story, sort of, you know, kind of pretext. But, you know, then as you watch it, you know, ultimately this movie's kind of slowly becoming this sort of very sad but very heartfelt character study, and like you're saying, this idea of kind of, you know, the same thing that so many horror movies are about, which is, you know, scary things with kids. You know, ultimately there's like tapping into this idea that take the most innocent, sort of full of light kind of aspects of humanity and you corrupt them, or you show the dark side underneath. And that combination is, again, can be really scary, but also just tragic. And somehow this movie, you know, you sort of walk the line between tragedy, horror, and then of course comedy. And it's a very delicate, it's a delicate sort of tonal balance. Were you guys, I guess the question that comes to mind when I sort of bloviate like that is like, were you guys talking tone a lot, overtly with actors and production, you know, ahead of time, or was it just sort of, here's the script and we're going to kind of see what, you know, you sort of let the script speak for itself? Or were there a lot of conversations of like, let's play this for a laugh, let's play this for a shiver?
I think definitely when it came to the actors, the main note was you know, this is your movie, you're a good person, you're the lead of this film, and somebody's going to
Protect your character, defend your character. Yeah.
And just because really nobody in this movie is doing anything that wasn't completely commonplace and isn't still completely commonplace. None of their arguments are things we don't hear every day. So that's kind of important. But in general, and this is why I think Carey was just so brilliant, is so brilliant, but also why she was the person I wanted so much, is that she's only ever interested in honesty. She's not at all interested in anything else. She's just completely straightforward. And so, you know, I think what was important for me, what it was my job to keep an eye on, was the kind of, I suppose, the trickery of the plot, the making sure that, you know, that we were going to, in order to sort of imply she'd killed Adam Brody's character and then reveal that she hadn't, to sort of pan up on her. But, you know, as far as Carey's doing it, she's just there like performing in the way that she performs as a kind of very real person. I think it was difficult, the tone, because you know, you don't want it to be arch, you don't want it to be alienating or kind of distant. And I mean, it is, you know, it is sort of necessarily kind of cold, I think, in some ways, because I think in order to look at things properly, you do need to probably be quite cold in some ways. But
Yeah, or at least feel like you're being unsparing, like you're not.
I mean, I really do. For me, the film has always been sort of about forgiveness and how we get it. That's, you know, seems to be the thing that we are all like eternally looking for. So I hope that it's kind too, or there's at least a possibility of forgiveness. But yeah, I think, yeah, unsparing is probably the truth, and why I felt so lucky to work with people who let it be that. Because obviously there were a lot of people who wanted it to be the movie that it like categorically wasn't and didn't want to be. So yeah, but it's funny with tone. I mean, this is such a strange conversation because I desperately want to ask you, it's like so many billions of things, but I know that's not telling you. But like, for me, it's sort of an innate thing. It's something that you sort of naturally bring and establish. I don't know how you, because obviously your films, what I love so much about your work is how like brilliantly different it all feels, how they're all brilliant and specifically themselves. There's not it's not the like I have no idea what your next film could be, and that's so thrilling. And that's how, those are all the people that's the stuff that I just think is so thrilling.
One of the things that was sort of really, I guess, again, surprising here, watching this, and you know, and sort of thinking about it, like almost thinking about how it might relate or not relate to things I would do or try to do in my work, is like you take kind of the audience on a surprising path. Now, obviously, there's surprises in the plot, which are really fun and juicy, and it really delivers on that kind of shocking, you know, twist and turn level. But what you do that so many clever plot-driven movies just don't, is that those twists and turns actually come with emotional weight. You know, I think, for instance, just the time that you spend in this movie between Carrie and Beau, and just sort of building up this sort of really kind of lovely love story that is a counterpoint to everything else that's going on. And then the way that that gets, you know, sort of, it's such a gut punch in a way to the viewer, and yet of course it's like inevitable. There's it has, you know, the way the good tragedy is inevitable, where you're like, of course this is the story this movie is telling, and it's the truth. It's, you know, and that's part of what makes it a gut punch. But I guess it's less a question and just more sort of commending the fact that it's one of the rare movies where the twists actually have take an emotional toll, which I think so often, even a lot of the great twists we remember in movies past don't really. They just exist solely on the level of intellectual joy, of the kind of, you know, the sort of being thrown, which we like to be as an audience member. It's rare that a twist actually punches you emotionally in the gut.
Thank you so much. But I think also that's sort of, I think so much of writing and making anything is that, and particularly for this film, so much of it came from this, you know, what would I do? If I was going to do this, what would I do? I'm not going to resort to violence because it's not really in my nature. And also I know what the consequences would be, which, so, you know, as this film demonstrates, so like, what could I do? and why would I do it? And so it was always, I think for me, and I think for lots of women, I think, and lots of people in general, we're quite good at stomaching things on our own behalf. It's when something happens to someone we love that things become unbearable. And really for this film, for me and Carrie, so much of it was about Nina, and this kind of, this void at the heart of this film, which is somebody who's missing, and missing for such a long time that they're profoundly gone. Like everyone wants to forget about this. And the romance was so important because I think we all wanted it to go well, because we all want romance to save us. And it was important that we saw how lonely and hard the decision that she made was, I guess, because the other decision would have been just to like marry an incredibly tall, handsome, funny pediatric surgeon. You know,
Yeah.
It's too good to be true. And that was the thing. That's why Beau is just such a genius and so wonderful. It's just like at every point he was like, oh, this guy is just it's just too much. And I was like, yes, it is too much. And it's deliberately too much. I mean, you know, he keeps turning up at her place of work. He won't take no for an answer. Like, there are also things about that character when you go back, we're like, ew.
Right. Yeah. But things we've been taught to love in movies. So I wanted to like just talk about one scene specifically because I was just really curious about it. And it's one of my favorite scenes. It's the scene where Carey Mulligan and Madison meet at the is that Jar, by the way, the restaurant? No, I was like, I think I know this place. That's not why I'm asking. I'm asking again, just going back to what we were talking about before, of like how you stage and shoot a scene and rehearse it with actors. Now, on the face of it, this would be an easier scene to say block because they're sitting at a table. But the way you pace it and the way you shoot it is so smart. And it involves, you know, kind of beginning sort of somewhat traditionally shot, reverse shot, and then suddenly we're farther than we would think to be as you kind of start to sense the chasm opening. And then you start this wonderful kind of push in as the subject turns. And anyway, the whole thing is sort of spine tingling and scary and sad and uncomfortable and all the things that it wants to be, and incredibly rich. You know, just almost, and we could take it as a microcosm of the movie because it's a sort of seemingly simple scene. Was the progression of camera angles there thought out in advance? How much do you rehearse? You know, obviously again, with a time frame like you had on this movie, there's not that much time for rehearsal, but just curious, like how much had Carey and Allison worked the scene beforehand? How much had you kind of pre-visualized it?
So that was the first day. That was the first thing we shot, was that.
Oh, really?
It was just so thrilling. Everything about that day was just so thrilling. The answer is we didn't rehearse at all. I don't even think Alison and Carey had met, which, you know, isn't a bad.
Great in a way, yeah.
Kind of works. And I think it depends on the actor, actually, is the truth. But I think that both Carey and Alison work very well not rehearsing. I think, you know, you can lose a lot of stuff in a rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
Some people really need it, and I get that. But in general, I'd rather the mistakes than something that feels well worn, something that's lost its, and particularly with those scenes, you know, those long two-handers.
Mm-hmm.
So much of it, as you say, so much of it is pacing, is kind of push and pull between who's got power and who doesn't anymore. Yeah. And so you kind of need them to surprise each other a little bit. So that, so it was, we kind of went straight into it. And the good thing about that scene is there's a little time jump. So it is kind of it's sort of almost in three parts. It's Cassie on her own and us as the audience with her, seeing the beginnings of that plan as she kind of swaps out her champagne for ginger ale. And then the little bit at the beginning when they say hi to each other. But really the main thrust of that scene is at the end when the plates are weird. And I think, you know, me and Ben is just so brilliant and thoughtful about this stuff. And so much of the camera work we were saying is and so much of the framing, the art direction is all about, is just about kind of making those traps, just setting the traps and then feeling the doors close as they kind of creep in. And I think, you know, what was great for them is that in terms of blocking, you're kind of fixed anyway, and there's something so pleasurable about the stasis and how, you know, it's the same with Dean Walker. When you're sitting opposite someone at a table, you kind of don't have anywhere to go. I mean, standing up, as any of us who've been on like a bus and like a scary person walks in and starts being frightening, threatening, like how many of us get up and move? We don't. You're fixed when you're sitting down. So that's quite kind of, it's an exciting bit. Yeah. So me and Ben were just talking a lot about, you know, when is the moment, the first moment when this person feels the trap on their leg.
And I know what you mean also about the kind of confined movement. You sort of, you set up a scene like that, and then something as simple as like a glass of red wine being spilled feels like a bomb, you know. It's just kind of, or yeah, again, like Dean Walker rising up from her desk, or the amazing cutaway. I love, and that's a whole other conversation, which is just where you cut to the lobby. Was that in the script that you would do the time jump or do something like that? Or was it in editing where you're like, this would be brilliant, let's cut to the lobby?
I don't think it was in the script, but it was definitely in our shot list. So it must have been in there before. I can't remember at which point we decided that, but I think absolutely. Also, I feel, and maybe this is the Britishness of me and why I can only really deal with stuff in a kind of humorous way, but like I can't really look at a huge amount of sustained emotion. I find difficult, and so actually there is this kind of like that, the sense of like pulling out is both funny and a relief. You know, I think it's, you're suddenly out of this sort of world that Cassie's built. And anyway, but yeah, as you say, that's a whole other kettle of fish. But again, the stuff that we did pre-plan, which we needed to pre-plan, was stuff like, you know, a lot of biblical references. You know, I'm not big on subtlety in general. I think it's kind of an overrated thing in filmmaking sometimes. It's fun not to be subtle. For this, you know, if Cassie's an avenging angel, there was no moment that we didn't, you know, in some ways get, if we could, an angel wing, a halo. And in that scene in Jar, we swapped out one of they had these,
yes,
yeah, one of them red, the one above her, and it's both when she's sitting down above her and when she's at the bar. We found kind of the angle so it would kind of always be there. And, you know, that kind of stuff is just so fun, and you can do that, and Carey doesn't need to know any of that's happening, but I think that's important that she doesn't.
And you can do it again, going back to just it's the things you can do that say a lot, that are thrifty, that don't, where you don't have to blow your budget on it.
I want to just be known as unsubtle and thrifty.
Unsubtle and thrifty, it's pretty much the recipe for filmmaking.
but no, it's just, but you know, all of this is kind of me going around about saying, but when you have two really amazing actors, you kind of don't want to fuck around too much. Like, yes, you want, you know, you want to pull people in, and the camera can say so much about what's happening, but you know, particularly with Carey, I just so rarely want to do anything but just be on her face all the time, because not only is she so good, but it's such a pleasure to watch her. I don't at any point feel like it's not real. Like, it's funny watching her in The Dig, because I just watched that a couple of days ago and I've never seen it and didn't really know much about it actually. But every time you see her, it's a relief. I feel like, I'm just like, I know it's just going to be beautiful, whatever it is. And so that made making the film so easy, because everyone else is brilliant too, but also they're all kind of facing off in even the bits at the end when she's
still present, you know. It's yeah, you have someone at the center of the film who, even after they're gone, um yeah, they linger.
yeah.
Well, I think we've gone over our time limit, but it was a pleasure. I could talk with you about the movie for a lot longer, but this will suffice for now, hopefully. And just wanted to thank you for taking the time to talk, and thank everyone who watched, listened. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you so much.